Apple released so many iPads in the past few years, and it's become really exhausting to keep track of which is which. We have the iPad, iPad Air, iPad Pro 10.5 inch, iPad Pro 11 inch, iPad Pro 12.9 inch, iPad mini. I think that's it. But there are different generations in those models, and they all have different processors. So which one's the most worth it? Well, I believe it's this one, the iPad Pro 11 inch first generation. This generation is now selling for $519 for the 64GB model and $599 for the 256GB model. But anyways, let's stack this generation up against its competition to see why I believe this generation gives you the most bang for your buck. The new iPad Air starts at $599 for the 64GB model, and the first generation iPad Pro 11 inch refurbished gives you 256GB for your $599. The iPad Air does have a newer processor. It has an A14 processor as compared to this generation's A12X. After looking at some articles with benchmarks, the A14 is only slightly better than the A12X. And in some cases, the A12X actually beats the A14. But aside from the processor, the biggest thing for me on an iPad is the pad part of it, the display. The iPad Air has a 10.9 inch 60Hz screen, whereas the iPad Pro, again, this one, has a 11 inch 120Hz screen with the ProMotion technology. The screen size may not sound like much, it's only a 0.1 inch difference. However, it's actually pretty noticeable because the bezels are a little thicker on the iPad Air. The big difference, however, is the refresh rate. You're getting double the refresh rate. And I think that refresh rate on an iPad is super important because most of the tasks you're doing, which is like browsing Netflix or browsing YouTube or scrolling through emails and messages, these tasks are the main tasks when you use an iPad. And when you have a 120Hz screen on your iPad, all of it just feels smoother. The iPad Pro also has better sounding speakers. What about the iPad mini? It's super cute. I've seen it in real life, in person. It's really fun to hold in your hand. It's nice, and it actually has the best processor out of the bunch. It has the A15 processor, but it's still missing the ProMotion technology that I, again, really want on an iPad. The iPad mini is priced at $499 for the 64GB model, and I think $649 for the 256GB model. So it's more expensive than this generation iPad, but you're getting a smaller screen and you get a lower refresh rate screen. But in return, I guess you get a better processor. So if you really need the portability of a iPad mini, sure, go for it. But for me, I think the 11 inch is plenty portable enough, and it has a 120Hz refresh rate screen. Now let's stack this first generation up against the other generations of the 11 inch iPad Pro. The second gen iPad Pro 11 inch has a A12Z processor, and you're also getting a better camera with a LiDAR scanner. Useless for me, but maybe it's useful for you. And the jump up to the second gen refurbished model is around $80. But for me, I would save the $80 and buy an Apple Pencil to use with the first gen iPad. The third generation iPad Pro with 256GB of storage is $899, which is $300 more than this first gen iPad. And with that $300, you are getting the M1 chip that is really amazing. Display, however, in the third generation is still the same. And again, this is the newest model of the iPad Pro. It's the M1 chip, but it doesn't have the mini LED technology and the 12.9 inch. It's still just the same screen as the first generation. And everything else is about the same. So if you really need heavy workloads on your iPad, and I would say if your iPad is your main workhorse, sure, spending the $300 might be worth it for you. I want to mention that the competition for the iPad is still just other iPads. Apple is dominating the tablet market, which we all kind of already knew, and there's no competition other than itself, which is super impressive. But the differences between the past model years of the iPad have been really minimal, and I believe this is due to the extremely limiting iPad OS. We've been seeing this for years now. When will an iPad become like a laptop or like a real computer? But it's still in 2021 really limiting to use an iPad. It definitely does not have the capabilities of, say, a full-fledged PC or even a Mac. And it's been a long time. It's been years. Ever since we found out that iPads had crazy benchmark results, we've always been wondering, how do we take advantage of all this performance in this tiny package? But because of the limiting software capabilities, I've only been using an iPad for media consumption, reading and writing scripts, using it as a secondary display from time to time, and also note-taking. Note-taking is actually really good on an iPad. Writing feels amazing with the Apple Pencil. And for these tasks that I listed, maybe I have a title here, I can't justify stepping up to like an A12X or A14 or A15 or M1 chip for these simple tasks. For video editing, photo editing, and programming, the more intensive tasks, I use MacBook. Not only because a MacBook has better processors, but also because of the software. The software capabilities on a Mac are just so much more developed. You can just do so much more on an actual Mac than you can on an iPad. Which again is why I feel like the hardware updates on an iPad are kind of meaningless. The tasks you do on an iPad are just media consumption. We're getting slightly better CPU scores and then really incremental, and I feel like they don't matter for an iPad experience. Again, what I do think really matters on an iPad is the refresh rate. So the iPad Pro first generation has the 120 Hz, iPad Air does not, iPad Mini does not, iPad second gen does, but it's more expensive, and I would recommend saving that money, get an Apple Pencil to use with your first generation. And the iPad Pro third generation also has the same screen and the crazy M1 chip. But again, I don't need the crazy M1 chip. The speakers are the same, the display is the same, the Apple Pencil second generation works on all of these devices. You're getting a worse camera, but I've never taken serious photos and video with an iPad. For the few tasks that the iPad can do, this first generation iPad Pro 11-inch handles all of those tasks perfectly, and I have no complaints with this machine. Let me know in the comments which iPad is your favorite. Maybe it's not one of the iPads I covered in this video. Maybe you're still using an older iPad. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all in the next one.